To be honest, Melissa, I suppose because I was so young, I don't actually remember very much about it. And
Mhm.
perhaps more importantly, I don't remember not having type 1
Mm.
diabetes. And I think sometimes that's a good thing
Right,
because I have
right.
no recollection of a time where I wasn't constantly thinking, what am I eating? What am I doing exercise wise? What's the weather
Yeah,
like?
yeah.
How are my blood sugars? I've never had that experience. So yeah, so this year is my 50th anniversary.
Well, hello and welcome to the show. Today we welcome Ruth Collins. Thanks for joining us today, Ruth.
It's great to be here joining you from the UK where it's a very sunny afternoon.
Yes, we have that in common today. We had what it's weird because, I live in Florida and it's April, almost May. The weather's been a little wacky because we're used to what we call nor'easters. It's kind of a term we use, basically the way that the wind and the storms are coming off the ocean. We're used to those in September and October. But yesterday, I was reminded by my husband, who's very aware of weather and surf and all of that, yeah, April brought one of those yesterday, which was it's just you just never know what's gonna come, but today it cleared up and it's beautiful, and we're back to
No.
hot and humid, so yeah, things are good. Well, we had a chance to bump into each other, and I'm so thankful that we did, and recently guested on your show, The Long View, which we're gonna talk and kind of unpack a little bit more, give the listeners a chance to know what you're doing over there on your podcast. So we have had a chance to get to know each other a little bit. So you have been living with type 1 diabetes for 50 years now. So you were a young girl when this all happened. So kind of give us a recap of or a summary of what that was like for you.
So I was diagnosed in 1976, which if I mention that to my children, they just completely glaze over because it sounds like, it was when dinosaurs were on the earth or something.
Understood.
And so I was 5 years old. And to be honest, Melissa, I suppose because I was so young, I don't actually remember very much about it. And
Mhm.
perhaps more importantly, I don't remember not having type 1
Mm.
diabetes. And I think sometimes that's a good thing
Right,
because I have
right.
no recollection of a time where I wasn't constantly thinking, what am I eating? What am I doing exercise wise? What's the weather
Yeah,
like?
yeah.
How are my blood sugars? I've never had that experience. So yeah, so this year is my 50th anniversary.
Nice. Yeah, you bring up something that's so important. And I know we're both in this space meeting people and some women and probably men as well that you're having on your show and you're bumping into, but a chance to develop relationships is how the diagnoses are happening at all times of life. You were 5, I was 14. That was kind of more of the standard age of diagnosis, which was it was a childhood diagnosis, right? So how many times have we been asked, were you born with it, right? I don't know how many times I've been asked that.
Yes, lots
Yeah.
and lots of times. And people are often surprised at just how young I was. But
Mm.
you're right. I have spoken to people on my podcast, one American guy, fantastic guy, who was diagnosed at 7 months old. And at the
Mm.
time, I think that was in the early 80s. At the time, he was the youngest person in the world to have
Oh,
ever been diagnosed. And I know we've both got children. Can you imagine? Can you
I
imagine
know.
trying to control type 1 diabetes in a 7 months old baby? I mean,
No,
that's quite
no.
that's quite an extraordinary thing.
It sure is, especially, and I guess it does depend on the time, the stage of, or I should say, the age of technology. Because you and I both grew up in this, obviously, this late 70s and the 80s where there wasn't too much on hand, but we didn't know any better, did we?
No, that's right. And
Yeah.
I explained to people how I had glass syringes that you
Mhm.
might use to inject a horse. I think a veterinary would
Right.
use them, and they had
Yeah.
screw-on needles which were huge, and this glass contraption lived in its own container full of surgical spirits. And even today, if I smell surgical spirits, it takes me
Mm,
back to that time where I would have to unscrew the top and screw the needle
mhm.
onto the syringe,
Yeah.
draw up the insulin manually, and then inject it that way. But my goodness, yeah, how things have come on now.
Yes, it brings up it really does point to how resilient we are. And as, we're here and whatever is given to us, tossed our way, we do find a way to manage it,
Yeah,
you
and
know? Yeah.
I really like the way you said resilience there, because actually that's something, particularly as I get older, I'm starting to really value from my
Mm.
diabetes. That resilience, the problem solving, the commitment to something, the commitment to looking after yourself, eating healthily. And actually, I'm starting to see that as quite a positive thing in my
Yeah.
life. And until now, it's kind of sat over there as just something that I get on with. But now I'm thinking, no, that's taught me a lot. That's taught me a lot.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what about technology? You mentioned the dark ages where that really was all that was available and that's all they knew at that time. It's all you knew at that time. So how are you now and how is your mindset around the different technologies? And if you wouldn't mind sharing if you're on a pump or if you're doing daily injections or if you do happen to use a CGM like I do, yeah,
Yeah.
our listeners love to hear what's working for you right now.
I know, because there are so many solutions out there.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
people just have to find their own way, find the thing that works best for you. And right now, for me, I've been incredibly lucky throughout
Yeah.
my 50 years with diabetes to have been given the opportunity to sort of try various things. Yes, I did multiple daily injections for many, 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 many years.
Okay.
The syringes became the pen,
Yeah.
and I
Mhm.
would, and I'd have the pen for both a bolus and a basal insulin. And
Mhm.
then I moved on to probably what came next was the pump. And I think that was perhaps about 12 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
I went on to a
Okay.
pump. But I think at that stage I was still finger pricking um,
Okay.
with, the little a drop of blood off the top of your
Mhm.
finger. Because, of course, prior to that, all you had was a urine sample
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
little dipstick in it.
Mm.
And even before that, a urine sample where you would put a little tablet in it and it
Mhm.
would fizz away. It was like a science experiment. You'd put it in
Yeah,
a
it
test
really
tube,
was. Yeah.
it would fizz and buzz, and then give you, a really basic reading. So
Yeah.
pump then led to CGM, which for me has been the biggest game changer, really.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah.
But now, for the last almost a year, I've been on the closed loop hybrid system.
Okay. Okay.
So what that means is that my CGM talks to my pump constantly. So I don't have to give any thought to my basal insulin that
Mhm.
adjusts itself every 8 minutes and responds to whatever I'm doing. Obviously, I still have to, review my food,
Mhm.
give myself the carbohydrate content. But on the whole, that ticks along quite nicely. I'm going to say on the whole, though, Melissa,
Mhm.
because you and I know that as women in our 50s, there are whole other things going on that sometimes disrupts that a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yes. Yes. Those variables for sure. Yeah. And it's different for everybody. And this is definitely something, this is a topic, this is the main topic of my upcoming book. And yeah, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. This is about you today. But yes, hormones, hormones, hormones at all ages. And the sooner we understand why it's happening and how it's happening to our body, the better the best we can make those adjustments and just giving ourselves a little bit of just some grace with that too, and just understanding because don't you think, it really does pay. And I know you've had a lot of years to kind of think through just the mindset of this disease that we, in essence, can't control. All we can do is make choices and try to influence the outcomes, which is really, I think, is the best way to really say it because there are no guarantees, is there?
No, and I'm starting to not enjoy the term control
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
what are we looking for there? I mean,
Yeah.
what are we trying to achieve? I think
Right.
how you described it as being, influencing
Yeah.
and managing, but it always makes me laugh when you go to if you go to a doctor, maybe not someone you see that regularly, and they might say, "Oh, how's your diabetes? How's your control?" And I think, where do you want me to start? I mean,
I
literally,
know. I
yesterday it was
know.
fine,
Mm.
today not so much. There's so many variables
Yes,
there.
it is a moving target, very dynamic as we are as blood sugar. It is as it is for everyone. We just happen to be in that population that actually has to monitor it so that we can make some good decisions around it. But the average person's blood sugar, as you know, everybody varies a little bit post-meal, stress, all those things, and hormones, right? So all the things that affect us, we got our finger on it a little more. Yeah. Do you feel like this is actually something that's coming up more and more, even for myself, as far as how much time we spend, whether it's per hour or throughout the day, looking at our data? Or, because I think that could be that's obviously, I'm right with you with the CGM. I think it was a game changer. It really does take the guesswork. And again, there's some variations with how this is another whole thing that we could talk about is how accurate are our CGMs, how dependable they are. But I think here or there's a ballpark value that they're giving us, and they still can kind of steer us. Minus the sensor failures that obviously are going to occur, with any sort of device. But just what I'm hearing, especially from ladies that I talk to, is that, especially with hormonal changes and just that feeling of overwhelm of life and everything around them, really how they're feeling. But it can be triggering to have information, and then depending on how we're looking at it, or if we choose to open up the app, or in my case, it's the iPhone. I have it on an app on the iPhone. How often, or my watch? I even have it on my watch. It's like there's so much information. How do you kind of think about that as far as how much is good enough for you? How much information is good enough in order to live without it being too kind of detrimental to our mental health, right?
Yeah, that's such
Yeah.
an interesting question because you're right. And although I said that the CGM was a game changer, and of
Yeah.
course it has been because it gives me much more detail that I
Yeah.
can work with. But I have found myself sometimes almost becoming a slave to it and
Mm.
thinking, okay, what's it doing now? What's it do? Am I going up? Am I going down? Am I
Yeah.
steady? Is it mine has 2 arrows when I'm going up
Right.
quickly, 2 arrows when I'm going down quickly. So how quickly am I going down? And you can become a little bit too focused on it and too
Mhm.
focused on the tiny bits of detail.
Yeah.
And I have felt myself going there from time to time. And I just have to say to myself, take a step back. This system that I'm on adjusts itself as best it can. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not brilliant. It's working on AI and
Sure.
it's working on my algorithm, what it knows about me, what it knows about my typical day and that sort of thing. But it doesn't know if I've done anything unusual that day. It doesn't
Mm.
know if I've been particularly stressed. And so I I try not to become too much of a slave to the data and try and keep much bigger picture because my system will say to me when I look back in the last day, the last week, the last month,
Mm.
the last 3 months, how much of that time was I in range? And so that's what I try to focus on because sometimes days don't go like you're expecting. And
Mhm.
sometimes I look back and I might say to my husband at the end of the day, look at this. This was a really bad day. And I'm really lucky. My husband understands it. We've been
Mhm.
married 33 years, so he's lived with it for a long time. And some days I look at it and I think, yeah, I've not done well today. But that's not the right approach. So
Yeah.
now I try to say, okay, today didn't go that well. I'll start again tomorrow
Yeah.
and I'll look at what that has done to my overall picture for the last 3 months or the last months
Yeah.
and try and keep it in context because otherwise you can just become obsessed by it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can really turn into a slippery slope with, I think, and you mentioned it, I think at the very beginning is really just understanding what that control, again, we don't like the word control, but we're going to use it in this context. What does that mean? How, what are our expectations? But that's a crazy thing to have to think about. Again, another thing that we have to check ourselves on, right?
Yeah. It's interesting there you said, "How good is good enough?" Because in my work, I quite often say to myself or say to my colleagues, "Yeah, good enough is absolutely good enough."
Yeah.
Not everything in life has to be perfect. Good
No.
enough is good enough. So maybe I should use that a little bit more, I think, in my diabetes management. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
good enough is good
yeah,
enough.
that's right, and it's almost, we can think about that hourly glucose, even if it's just like you say, if we're looking back at a day that was more of a roller coaster than others, and just taking a step back and maybe observing, what happened, what could I have done differently? Or was it just one of those days and letting go, because we can't, yeah, just like you say, we can't get too caught up on what happened. All we can do is just kind of learn from it and move on. But we've got to learn to move on, don't we? Something we've got to just let go and use it for us for the future instead of it kind of dragging us down into, again, those expectations that in some cases are not possible, if that's even a
No.
fair statement. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yesterday I had a hospital appointment. They were running late. I knew I had to get to my office, and I could see, looking back, I could see that morning where I was just sitting waiting, thinking, I still got an hour to drive to my office. My blood sugars were running high for no reason other than
Mm,
the stress I was under, the
yeah.
cortisol that released, and
Yeah.
but now I recognize that. I think, okay, yeah, I was really anxious about getting to work. I was really anxious about the delay in the hospital. I can explain that. That's why my blood sugar was high. Let's just move on. Let's just
Yeah.
move on with the rest of
Yeah.
my day.
Yeah, yeah, and is that harder for you? It sounds like it is because you're human like I am and all the listeners, but when we're in it, it's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all know what stress does. We all know what in this case, acute stress. It's not that wouldn't necessarily. I don't think that would fall under chronic stress because it's momentary stress that is so impactful. I think I've shared this story on the show before, and I'll share it again, but I'll make it a shorter version. But basically, I was at an airport with a friend. We were flying to Chicago for a diabetes event, and just locally here. So we both lived, within driving distance of the airport, sitting in the terminal waiting for the flight. And then we hear over the loudspeaker, literally, the flight has been canceled. And yeah, canceled, not just delayed, but canceled, which is kind of an odd thing because usually they just kind of put it off for a little bit. So and we were both sitting there. We both have CGMs. This wasn't too long ago. And it's so interesting because I was going to Chicago. First time I'd been there, I was looking forward to the event, but I had no skin in the game when it came to the travel to getting there. I was disappointed. But for her, she was presenting at this conference. And this was the morning, and she had to be there by obviously that day, that later that afternoon, in order to be ready. And she panicked. The stress just overtook the situation. And we did happen to take a minute and look at our CGMs. Mine stayed pretty steady. You can just imagine what hers did.
Yeah.
It shot straight up.
Yeah.
It was so depicting of really what happens to our bodies when all of that is happening while it's happening. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that instant response. I ended up going home because, again, the next flight wasn't going to be till the next day. And that just bit into the whole weekend. So it's like, well, maybe this wasn't meant to be. She ended up having to come back to the airport later that night to take a later flight because, again, she was committed to being there for that extended weekend. So, anyway, I always like to tell that story. It doesn't lie. The situation, the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I mean, we can all relate to that. We've all
mhm,
been in stressful moments, but actually it's only been relatively recently that I've properly started to recognize that as impacting my blood sugar in such a
mm,
significant way. And
yeah,
again, I don't know whether that's because it's tied to the menopause as well, and that hormonal time bomb going off that actually makes me really receptive. And the reason I say that is that I always used to I did a lot of running. And then I
Okay.
stopped about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I got back to running this year. And I found that if I went for a 5K, sort of 3 mile run,
Mhm.
it would send my blood sugar really, really high
Hmm.
because of the stress I was putting my body under. If I go for
Mhm.
a walk is fine. A walk is a nice
Mhm.
exercise, gets your legs going, that sort of thing. My blood sugar drops because that's normal
Mhm.
exercise.
Yeah.
But the stress on my body connected to the run makes my blood sugar rise. Now I can deal with that. Now I recognize it and I understand it. I can deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. So tell our listeners, and I'm assuming you might do the same sort of thing I do. So what do you do in that situation before going out for a run,
So
anticipating
now
the rise?
Yeah, so actually, I can run 5 kilometers, about just over 3 miles, in about 30 minutes. So literally just before I go, I put my pump onto boost, so it's
Okay.
giving me a little bit extra.
Yeah,
It's my signal to my pump because the pump doesn't know what I'm doing. It's not
that's
counting my
right.
steps. It doesn't
No,
know that I'm
no.
exercising, but it knows I'm doing something weird that's likely to make my blood sugar go up. So I put it on boost. I leave it on boost for the whole of the run and for about 2 hours afterwards.
Mm,
But then I need to watch it really carefully
yeah.
because then once the cortisol and the stress hormone is fading, my blood sugar drops really quickly.
Mhm.
So if I go for a run at 9 a.m., usually about midday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, around lunchtime, my blood sugar will drop
Yes.
massively. So then
Yes.
I have to tell my pump to ease off
So
my
you gotta eat.
basal level. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about those settings. It's all about timing.
Yeah. Oh
Timing might
yeah.
be the word of the year for me. I don't know. It seems like I toss it out at least once an episode. With diabetes, it's all about timing. It's understanding what's going to happen at what time and how you can kind of come in and make some changes in order to mitigate that. And of course, exercise does help sensitivity later in the day. So it all makes sense. Once the cortisol starts to drop, things are back to what feels safe and normal. And then obviously you're going to be more resistant based on the exercise. But
Yeah.
not knowing this could just drive us into highs and lows, couldn't it? Yeah, the roller coaster begins unless we understand what's happening. Yeah, great example. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Tell us about. I want to hear about your podcast. Again, I've had a chance to be on the show. I don't believe it's aired yet in accordance to when we are recording today. So it is called The Long View: Living with Type 1 Diabetes After 50 Years, which tells a story, tells us all about you. But tell us why you started it and what is what are some highlights that you're noticing right now as the show is starting?
Well, so I was incredibly lucky to have a career working with the BBC here in the UK. I worked as predominantly a radio journalist and had the most enormous honour of interviewing thousands and thousands of people. I was trying
Mm.
to work it out the other day, and I think I probably interviewed in my broadcasting career about 8,000 people. And I say lucky because there is genuinely nothing better than talking to somebody
Mm.
about something they're passionate about,
Mm.
something they're knowledgeable about, something that they talk about with feeling, with joy, with sadness. I mean, it doesn't matter what the feeling
Mm.
is,
Mhm.
but if you can help somebody harness that and tell you the most amazing story, whether it's about their own life, whether it's about
Mm.
something they're doing, something they've achieved, something, even if it's something, to do with their work and the role they play and the
Sure.
responsibilities they have. So I've always loved doing that. And now today I work as a media trainer. And
Mm.
so I have the opportunity to go and speak to people about, how to prepare for speaking to the media, what to expect, how to use their voice, how to show that emotion and that sort of thing.
Mm.
And then as it was coming up to 2026, and I thought, oh, 2026, that's my 50th anniversary of having type 1 diabetes. I suddenly thought, why don't I combine those two things? Combine
Mm.
my love of talking to people and hearing people's stories
Mm.
and my knowledge and my own experiences of type 1 and combine those to actually create a podcast. And perhaps like you, when you started, Melissa, I thought, okay, so where do I start? What do I do first?
Mm,
Obviously, I know how to interview people. I know how to do a great
yeah.
recording and things like that. But I started to connect with people mainly on LinkedIn and on Instagram.
Mm,
Somebody that I would see maybe on a diabetes group post something interesting. And I would sort of DM them directly and say, hey, do you fancy being on my podcast? And I was blown away. I was
mm,
blown away by how many people said, yeah, I'd love that. I'd
mm.
love that. Because we all have such a unique experience.
Yes.
Of course, there are things within our diabetes journeys that connect and we can relate to. And you and
Mm,
I, as both as type ones, we can talk a language and we can talk about things that have happened to us and we
mm.
totally relate to it. But at the same time, our experiences are different and each
Different.
day is different. So
Mm,
I've been so lucky to talk to a huge range of people who are relatively recently diagnosed, people who are parents of children.
mm,
That's been particularly interesting. I'm
mm.
a parent, and I cannot imagine
Yeah.
how difficult it would be to actually support your child going through a diagnosis and then working out their management. Must be incredibly difficult. So it's really interesting to talk to them about
Mhm,
how they're coping. I've talked to people who work in the area of diabetes. So a fantastic woman who's an academic who's researching what workplaces can do to
mm,
accommodate type 1 diabetics. I mean, really simple things like
mm,
having the carbohydrate value of foods in the canteen or in the,
mm,
in the restaurant, that sort of thing. I've talked to people who are professional sports people, two amazing guys who are part of the Team Novo Nordisk professional cycling squad.
mm,
Novo Nordisk are an insulin producer. I don't know if they produce yours, but I'm
mhm,
sure you would have heard of them. And
mhm.
they sponsor an elite cycling team. And every single person on that cycling team has type 1 diabetes.
Oh, so
And
things I did.
I've interviewed a couple of them. I've interviewed the guy who's the CEO and the founder. He was the one that was diagnosed at 7 months old. And I've
Okay.
also interviewed one of their team members,
Mm,
and their stories are just inspirational. I mean,
mm,
they're amazing. And in fact, both of them say that their diabetes has made them what they are today,
yeah,
which is really quite moving for those of us who sometimes struggle.
yeah,
It's worth which is
absolutely.
why I sometimes say, yeah, it's given
Yeah,
me a resilience. I can understand what they're saying about that.
yeah.
So they've been great. I've spoken to a fantastic chap who was only he's in his 50s, only diagnosed 5 years ago, and he's a
Mm,
triathlete. So he does Ironman triathlons. And I've spoken to other people in the States who have had different experiences, people who've had complications, so many different stories. It's
yeah,
been amazing. I'm sure you found that as well.
absolutely. And, I think what it does is, if we are a unique community of people that are experiencing and literally sharing our love to take care of ourselves in most cases. But I love the fact that you've met some people as well that are using diabetes for them rather than against them. So it's giving them a purpose. I can attest to that personally myself, for sure. It's definitely something that I've just tried to use and to continue to learn as well. I think that's one of my biggest takeaways is the women, mostly women on the show. I've had a few men that I continue to learn from, and those conversations stick. And sometimes it's just the little things they say or the observations that they've shared and in a lot of cases, it's triggering memories, it's triggering ideas. But I think the number one thing, and you could probably speak on this, is just the validation, knowing that we're not alone and that, yes, it is tough. There are obstacles, and this is how I've chosen to walk through and, to get to the other side. We need that so much in this community. So it gives us an opportunity to share, like you say, these stories with each
I
other.
know.
Yeah,
And how lucky are we to be able to do that?
we
Because
get to do this.
it's an
Yeah.
extraordinarily giving community. People
Mhm.
are so willing to share their stories, their experiences, their advice. So on my podcast, the last question I always ask everybody, and I asked it to you, Melissa, when we
Mhm.
did our recording, is if somebody is listening who's recently diagnosed or maybe struggling with their diabetes, what's the one piece of advice that you would give? And my goodness, I learn every time I ask that question. People often say, find your community, find your
Mhm.
support network
Mhm.
that you can share with and that you can talk openly
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
in a safe and understanding environment.
Absolutely.
Somebody the other day said, don't diabetes is not you. Do not ever think. This was a lovely young woman. Her name's Millie. She's on Instagram at Diabetes with Millie. And she'd be really interested in your work, Melissa, because she
Yes.
researches hormones, women, exercise, and type 1 diabetes. And she said to me, you have to always remember that you are not your diabetes. You and
Mm.
your personality and your diabetes are not the same thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, when you're struggling with your diabetes, take the opportunity to go and do something you enjoy. Go and sit in the sunshine, go for a
Yeah.
lovely walk, meet a friend for coffee, whatever
Yeah.
it is you want to do, because you and your diabetes are not the same thing. I thought
Yeah.
that was lovely advice.
Very
I
good.
recently
Yeah.
interviewed a lovely man whose daughter was diagnosed only back in January this year, so really
Mm.
recently.
Mm.
You have to feel it. You just have to go with the feeling that a new diagnosis gives you. And he talked about a feeling of grief and he talked
Mhm.
about a feeling of sort of fear, but he also talked about a feeling of hope and
Mm.
what he was hoping for his daughter as she starts her type 1 diabetes experience. So
Yeah.
all these little nuggets of
Yeah.
information and
Yeah.
advice are really, really helping me, and from the
Yeah.
feedback I'm getting on the podcast, I think they're helping other listeners too, which is fantastic.
It really is. Yes, yes. We are meant to do life together, especially with a chronic disease. And you and I, again, just to go back to the 70s and 80s, we were isolated. I know personally I was very isolated. We did not have online communities. We didn't have internet back then, people. We very much doing it on your own. And if you didn't have a local community, there really wasn't anybody besides your doctor to really talk to it about what you were going through and feeling. So I think over the years that can really weigh, and it can also be very detrimental because again, we've got to get these, like you said, the feelings out. We've got to share, we've got to learn, we've got to ask questions, we've got to have that confidence to move forward with this disease. And we can only do that with each other, I think.
Yeah. One of the amazing mums that I interviewed was telling me how she has a little support networks who are all mums of type 1 diabetics. And she said they went out for a Christmas meal and her husband was sending them photographs of plates of food saying, how many carbohydrates in this plate? So they could have like a little carbohydrate quiz whilst they were out for a social meal, which I thought was really funny, and the sort of thing only a diabetic parent would would
Would
enjoy
understand,
doing.
yes, would understand as well, yeah. Well, thinking, I want to talk to you about motherhood too. I think, and I don't know I honestly don't remember any upon diagnosis. Again, I was a teenager, even when I was in my 20s, in my later 20s, when I had my daughter. She's 30 this month as this podcast. I still can't believe I have a 30-year-old kid. Where did 30 years go, right? But I never heard that, well, you can never have children. I know it has been spoken. I know that stereotype around, the risk of women with diabetes going through pregnancy. I was lucky to never get that. I was definitely put in that high risk category, which kind of made me mad because I knew I was doing well with my numbers, but still, you just had to kind of let go and just respect that. But what was that like for you? Because I know you have a couple children and the process of, I always think it's a wonderful, because we have listeners of all ages on here, not just the midlife ones, but the wisdom that you can give those
Yeah.
listening. Yeah.
So back in 1976, I mean, my mum was told that
Mm.
I would never be well enough to have children, that I'd never be able to drive a car. and that I probably wouldn't be well enough to hold down a job. Now, I
Mm,
don't know, neither of us can remember exactly who said that or how they were
right,
qualified to even make that judgment. But
right.
can you imagine? My mum was oldest child. Can you imagine being told that your 5-year-old daughter might never achieve those things in life? I mean, my mum is amazing. And having been told that, her response was, okay, tell me what I need to do. Tell me what I need to
Mm,
do to get my daughter through this.
mhm, mhm,
She's inspirational. But I in those early stages always thought it would be too risky for me to have children.
mhm,
Of course, it quickly became clear that that wasn't the case at
mhm,
all. And so when I had my older daughter, who is now, she's 28 now, um, it took some planning. My diabetes team, my care team at my local hospital were absolutely fantastic. And they supported me to get my HbA1c
mhm.
as good as it could be before we tried to have a baby.
Okay.
And I was really well looked after throughout my pregnancy. In the later stages of my pregnancy, there are two things that amazed me. So, number one, my insulin needs. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So, at the beginning of my pregnancy, I was probably on about 35 units a day. And by the end of my pregnancy, I was on something like 120
Yeah,
units.
big
Um,
difference.
and
Yeah.
my understanding is that that's a hormone. The baby is releasing hormones
Mhm,
that
mhm,
impact your insulin requirements. And
mhm,
so, that really surprised me. I also, in the later stages of my pregnancy, I developed preeclampsia. So my
mm,
oldest daughter was delivered by cesarean section about 6 weeks early, and so that was
mm,
quite stressful. But I was really well looked after, and
mhm,
she was perfect. And
mhm.
and she's an amazing young woman.
Yeah.
So then when I had my second daughter 5 years later, none of that was so much of a surprise. And so
Mm,
it was kind of, okay, I've got this. I know my insulin requirements are going to go up. I know my baby is at risk of hypo immediately after it's delivered.
mhm,
So I know they're
mhm,
going to whisk her away. And
mhm.
I know she's going to be looked after. But again, with her, she was born 3 weeks early.
Okay.
Again, I was really well looked after because certainly here in the UK, they're concerned that babies of diabetic mothers can
Mhm.
become quite large, can't
Yeah,
they?
same here.
Because they kind of develop, because they're living in this quite glucose rich environment. And the
Okay.
babies develop. So after close monitoring, my second daughter was born 3 weeks early, again by a cesarean, but
Okay.
I was incredibly well looked after again,
Mm,
and
yeah.
I am absolutely blessed to have two beautiful
Mm,
girls.
yeah, yeah, it is the best thing ever. Yeah, so don't tell us that we can't. Just tell us. I'm not sure what to tell us, right? But that same sort of, I guess, those ideas, those supposed restrictions. You think about certain activities that we're told that we shouldn't do based on where we are. The first thing I could think of is skydiving or driving a fast car. All these things that are dangerous and on their own, but when you put somebody that could have compromised blood sugar during this, I guess it's one of those things, but it doesn't mean we can. It just means we need to be aware and then we have to be in tune with our body like we always try to be. So I like the idea that we can, like you said, with the pregnancy, we went in with a plan, you and I both, and we came delivered healthy girls. So all things were good for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's one of the overwhelming messages I get from my podcast guests, that actually there's nothing you can't do. I mean,
Nothing you can't do.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure NASA might not choose me to put me on the
Right.
space shuttle, but there's no reason why I couldn't do that if I planned it and I
Yeah.
prepared. Yeah,
I
there is
totally I
nothing you can't do.
I totally agree. And you brought up something at the beginning of your pregnancy that you mentioned that it seemed like you were figuring it out as far as how your body and your blood sugar's response was going to be as the trimesters kind of ticked along towards your delivery time with the need for more insulin. So you learned, and maybe your care team did too. Was this something that you were told ahead of time or were expecting? or were you all just kind of figuring it out as it was happening?
So do remember really clearly. I was in my office at work, and I was thinking, I've already had about 90 units of insulin today. Can this
Interesting.
possibly be right? I mean, am I about to crash into the world's biggest hypo? So I phoned my care team and I said, I don't know what's going on. And they said, it's fine, Ruth. It's absolutely fine. This is exactly what we would expect. It happens at,
Uh,
different people. It happens at slightly
sure,
different times,
sure.
but don't worry about it. Keep your monitoring, keep increasing your insulin as
Yeah,
much as you need to, and it might end up being 3 or 4 times,
yeah,
which was about right in the end.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, they'd obviously been through this with multiple mums. But when you're going through it for the first time,
Yourself.
you're learning something new every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, again, and you didn't have a CGM in those days either, did you?
No,
I know,
no.
we were it blows women's mind that I've shared this with, and we'll share it here on the show. We had pregnancies without a continuous glucose monitor.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, we didn't even have the internet. So
No?
I couldn't even,
Yeah,
Google, does pregnancy increase your
yeah,
insulin rate? I couldn't
no.
even do that.
Right, the
So, yeah,
access, yeah.
everything it was very old school, wasn't it?
Yes, yes, it really was, and, I hate to say it, but we kind of were experimenting, along with our doctors, and again, everything worked out. Thank goodness, right? Yeah, for sure. So, this kind of brings up hormones in general because obviously pregnancy trips up and, or yeah, trips up, I guess is a good word, as far as, how our hormones are gonna respond with the estrogen and progesterone. So you are in menopause like myself, and I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. I would love to share your experience and how and when, how was it obvious to you that there was some things happening that were not the usual when it comes to just maybe, and I'm assuming you noticed changes throughout your monthly cycles as, you were in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. But what changed for you? What was the light bulb that went off that said, "Huh,
Yeah.
this is different?"
Well, so until about 6 months ago, just before I was 55, I was thinking, I seem to have escaped this entire menopause thing. Lucky me. Lucky me. But oh my gosh, then I think I just absolutely crashed. And for me, it was the typical symptoms of hot flushes, tiredness, and a brain fog like I
Mm,
just have never experienced in my life. And I thought, oh my goodness, but of course, because I've got lots of friends who are women in their 50s, I'm thinking, okay, I know exactly what this is. I know exactly what this is. So this all was just before my older daughter got married last year. And I thought, I can't on her wedding day be, forgetting what I'm doing, forgetting what, where I was supposed to be. I can't
mhm,
be, having a hot flush. So I went to see my, um, local doctor, which in the UK we call a GP. Um, th- she was just brilliant because I was really anxious. I was really apprehensive,
mm,
and she actually said to me, Ruth, if you were your body doesn't make insulin, so you give yourself insulin.
mm,
If your body wasn't making, if you didn't have enough blood, we'd give you blood. If you didn't have enough oxygen, we'd give you oxygen. Your
mhm,
body is no longer making the hormones that it needs. Let us give them to you. And that suddenly took this huge weight of
mm,
responsibility and concern off me.
mm.
And I said to her, okay, yes, please. Yes, please. I was then
Yeah,
really worried, particularly because I had my daughter's wedding.
yeah.
I was thinking, is now a good time to start something like this? I said to her, shall I wait till after the wedding? She said, no, start now. Start now.
I met her, but I love her.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
That's a doctor I wanna hear.
Yeah, yeah. No, she said, start now and and come back to me in 4 weeks' time. So I did exactly as she said, and I started now. And I mean, of course, we've got busy lives. We've got a lot going on. We've got a lot of pressure in our lives.
Mhm,
So I still do have, times of forgetfulness,
sure.
but I do genuinely think that the hormone therapy that I am on has helped me enormously, and I am
Mm,
so grateful for it.
yeah, 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 I can second that, third that, and yeah, I totally agree. What was the first thing you noticed? And how long did it know? This is a question I get all the time, and the answer is different for every woman. It really
Thing
is.
I noticed after going on to hormone
Yes,
therapy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, what was
So
some changes?
probably the first thing I noticed was actually the physical response. So I wasn't getting the hot flashes,
Mhm, mhm.
um, and I was sleeping better. I wasn't sort of, getting really hot at night.
Yeah,
So of course, sleeping better helps you with your general
everything, right?
well-being anyway, doesn't it? Yeah. So that was really noticeable. And then I do think, I'm hoping I'm not just kidding myself, but I'm also pretty sure that my brain fog is less than it was.
Yeah,
So that probably followed a little bit after. I kind of think it maybe had a cumulative effect, and the gradual sort of return of those hormones that I clearly really needed
yeah, yeah.
eventually sort of dealt with the
Mhm.
majority of the symptoms.
Yeah, yeah, it really is like magic. I think estrogen specifically, yeah, because and I'm assuming you're on estrogen. It certainly sounds like it, but that really is the one that really does support many of these symptoms that you're talking about. So it is incredible. And so I mean, I have ladies in my group circle who again, we walk through this and we talk through it as a group and I give them some one-on-one time just to kind of unpack it to help them have the conversation with the doctor because it is about feeling equipped that you understand what's happening with your body. You understand that there are choices and that this is the conversation. You were very lucky to have a doctor that was so knowledgeable and so supportive. So that is really good. That's a obstacle that many women have to overcome or find another practitioner. Yeah, just that it's the insulin sensitivity. Within days, they notice a difference. It's incredible. I noticed that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this for me all tied into the stress and the cortisol really
Mm,
impacting my
mm,
blood sugars, like with my running, like when I'm
yeah.
anxious, I'm held up in the hospital appointments delayed, those sorts of things. So I'm still getting that. I'm still getting that, whether that's directly related to the menopause and my other hormonal changes, I simply don't know, Melissa.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I am still suffering with that. But I'm learning techniques to manage it. I'm learning,
Yeah.
okay, I know I'm going to be stressed because I'm going for a run. Let's adjust my insulin to make allowances for it.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I get the first step is awareness, just understanding it's a time to change. Awesome. And you're still kind of new to it. So this is something that you're still probably tweaking and just trying to find I'll call it our secret sauce, our magic dose, our magic formula. I don't know. Because again, we're all different and those things can change as time goes on too. And when other things in life might tip us to have to, whether it's needing more or less or whatever. So that's why it's so important to have a good practitioner that knows the language and knows how to support you. So very, very good. So for women in her 40s living or feeling overwhelmed, I'm going to kind of talk about, I'd love to bring more of your wisdom because we love hearing you and your story and all you've learned. What would you want her to understand about her body? You've already kind of pointed to this a little bit. I think the running thing, it just keeps reminding me of that because obviously running an activity is something that it's probably one of your kind of forms of therapy, right? It's your time. It's taking care of your body and being able to modify that as you need to with your pump settings and being able to do that. But what about physically in your body and aging? Yeah, but what kind of things can you share with our listeners?
Yeah. For me, I tend to frame it as respect. So a
Mm,
respect for your body, a respect for what it's been through. My body has made two beautiful women, to
mhm.
have two beautiful children. My body has sustained me to develop my career.
Mm,
My body enables me to go running when I need to.
mm,
My body has helped me achieve so many things. And so I want to respect it. And of
mm.
course, diabetes is a big part of my body. I've been incredibly blessed not to have had too many long-term diabetes
Yeah.
complications. And in fact, actually, my diabetes specialist was saying to me the other day that they are really noticing sometimes that it doesn't matter what you do, if you're prone to a complication, you will get a complication.
Mm.
You can have the most best control, the best numbers in the world, but
Yeah.
sometimes long-term complications still happen. So I
Mm.
consider myself to be really lucky, but I don't take it for granted. I think, okay, respect my body, respect my diabetes, give them the
Mm.
time and the attention that they need, because then I get the benefit of being able to do all these amazing things that I want to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yes. Yes. Again, and that helps to shift our relationship with this disease too, again, and just prioritizing us. It's okay to prioritize ourselves, isn't it? Sometimes it takes a little bit of age and wisdom for, for women especially to realize that. Forgive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of my guests, who's actually a fellow American like you, she uses a theory called the oxygen mask theory. You know, when you
Oh,
get on a
oh,
plane,
yes.
I'm going to tell you the
Yes.
story exactly how she told me.
Yes. Love it. Uh-huh.
When you get on a plane, and they say the oxygen mask may come down, put your oxygen mask on before
Mm-hmm.
you help anybody else. And
Yeah.
she said you need to use that in your day to day life, because only
Mhm.
when your oxygen and your
Yeah,
body is
that's right.
able to cope,
Yeah,
that's the only time that you can help others. So
yeah.
I think it's particularly as mums, we tend to put ourselves second
Mhm.
after our child. I need to look after myself. I need to
Absolutely,
put my own oxygen mask on before I help them.
absolutely. Yeah. So what does that mean to you, and how does that give you hope moving forward? It sounds like you're filled with hope. What does hope mean to you?
So I called my podcast The Long View because actually one of the questions I get asked a lot
Mm.
is, are you hoping for a cure? And I know you've spoken to people who are in all sorts of trials and things like that for your
Sure.
podcast, haven't you?
Uh,
But the question about a cure has been background music to my life for 50 years. And realistically, I can't imagine a world in which I would be suitable for any sort of treatment that might look like a cure. So for me and all the people that are living with type 1 diabetes in the similar way that I am, is a long view. It's not just how I got on today or tomorrow or this year. It's how I've dealt with this, how I've given it the respect it needs for the
mhm.
next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years. So that's why I've called the podcast The Long View.
Yeah.
But it is a long view that's filled with hope and filled with positivity,
Mhm.
because actually I've been able to achieve all sorts of amazing things, and I and I very much hope to continue to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And and I have seen so many changes. I've benefited from so many advances in technology,
Mm.
that all those things have contributed to where I am now, which feels like, a very positive place,
Mm.
but positive in the context of paying attention to it and giving it
Mhm.
some respect.
Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful way to close this conversation. I love it. Yeah. I really I have to agree with that. We can't help but get excited about something. And we can't help but think, well, maybe one day I want to do what I'm doing every day. And this persistence is going to have a vacation, right? We really need to gaze on the day to day and what can we do today? What can we do to help ourselves today? Who can we lean on? And to feel gratitude for all that we have done. And I think I totally agree. I think and it's not to not hope and to look forward and wish, but I think that's a slippery slope too, because we can depend on something that, again, we can't control, something we can't predict, but we can influence what we're doing day to day. And people like you in this space that we get to listen to and to give us words of wisdom and telling their stories, it makes living with diabetes a whole lot more manageable for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the biggest gift that me doing my podcast has given
Mm.
me. It's given me this community, and I share people's stories with other
Mm.
guests, and I sometimes put my guests in contact with each other if I think they've
Uh,
got, overlapping areas of interest, and I connect people on LinkedIn, and they involve me in things, and that's been so helpful for
yeah.
me to actually
Really good.
find that wider community. Yeah, I've really enjoyed that.
Really good. Yep.
Mhm. Right.
touch who we get to touch for sure. Well, thank you, Ruth. I appreciate your time and coming in here and sharing yourself with our listeners. So tell us how we can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, it's called The Long View Living with Type 1 Diabetes. I always say to people, search The Long View Diabetes, and I usually come up. I'm
Mhm.
on Apple and Spotify. I also have a website called thelongviewt1.com.
Okay.
Thelongviewt1.com. That's got all my podcasts on it. That's got my blogs. And it's also got how to contact me. And if you've got a great story to tell about your own diabetes experience, then I'd love, love, love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And yeah, just check all that detail and those links right here in the show notes to direct you to Ruth Collins. We appreciate you. So, and we hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did talking. I feel like I could just talk to you all day, and we probably could. It's too bad we're an ocean away, but maybe one day I'll get over to the UK. Okay, I've got that on my bucket list for sure. Everybody have an amazing day, and we will see you in here next time.